Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Um, I welcome you all to today's night's class of the Madrasatul Mumtiaz free online Nahw and Sarf class. So today, inshallah, we are going to the next topic in our Nahw exercises, which is Inna wa akhawatuha. Inna wa akhawatuha. And so we're talking about the verb, the particle, that is the harf that is called Inna wa akhawatuha, and other particles that are like it, that behave like the the harf Inna. So um so let's see what is the principle guiding the use of inna wa akhawatuha as explained by our text, the Kitab al-Nahw al-Wadih. So now inna wa anna wa ka'anna wa lakinna wa layta wa la'alla تدخل على المبتدأ والخبر فتنصب المبتدأ ويسمى اسمها وترفع الخبر ويسمى خبرها. So we are told that inna and its sisters. So what are the sisters of inna? Our qaida tells us that the sisters of inna are anna and ka'anna and lakinna and later and la'alla. So how do they function? I thought that تدخل على المبتدا والخبر. So they enter upon a mubtada and khabar, just like kana wa akhawatuha that also enter into a mubtada and khabar. However, the function here changes. What happens when inna and its sisters enter upon a mubtada and khabar is that fatansibul mubtada, and they make the mubtada to have nasbu. That is, they give the mubtada a fatha when they make it take nasbu. Wa yusamma ismaha, and it is the mubtada is now called is the ismu of that half of that sister of inna. For example, if inna enters upon a mubtada and khabar, then that mubtada we have what nasbu, and it will now be called ismu inna. وترفع الخبر ويسمى خبرها, and the khabar will be raised. The khabar will have what? It will have dhamma. It will remain in a, it will come to be in a rafa' state, and it will now be called what? Khabaraha. It will now be called khabaru inna. So basically what this has just explained to us is that when inna enters upon a mubtada and a khabar, then the mubtada becomes, the function of the mubtada in that sentence becomes ismu inna, and the function of the khabar in that jumla becomes, it becomes khabaru inna, or any of those other nouns. So how are these now? How are these huruf? How are these inna and its sisters? How can we use them when we have them in a sentence? How do we know what they mean whenever we see them in a jumla? So come up here a little bit and we can see it explained here in the text. So now, so we're told وَإِذَا تَدَبَّرْتَ مَعَانِي هَذِهِ الْأَحْرُفِ السِّتَّةِ, and if you look at the meanings of these 6 huruf in the examples that are given above, we will look at the examples inshallah immediately after looking at the meanings of the huruf of inna wa anna tufidani takida thubuti li khabari lil mubtada. So we are told that what you will find out that inna and anna, they translate into what? Into an emphasis of the establishment of the khabar as a feature for the mubtada. So if we say, for example, if we look at the example, the mathal that we have here, Al-jamalu sabun. The camel is patient. But here, then when we put when inna enters upon it, it becomes what? Innal jamala sabun. Verily, indeed, the camel is patient. So, what inna comes to do here, the function of inna here is basically that it puts more emphasis on the fact that the camel is what is patient. So that is the function of inna in a sentence. Another example is that what imtihanu qaribun. The examination is close. How do we so in this case what comes into it, khabar anna comes into that because alimtu anna al-imtihan qaribun. So I know that the examination is close. So this anna in this case what it functions as the word that in this case, and it gives us more emphasis. It emphasizes and establishes the meaning, the khabar, which is qarib, for the mubtada, which is imtihan. That's what it establishes, that the examination is indeed very very near. So, and another example here. So now let's look at the meaning of the next half. Ka'anna. Ka'anna tufidu tashbihi li mubtada'i bil khabar. What ka'anna does in a sentence is that ka'anna helps us. It means that there is a similarity between the mubtada and the khabar. So ka'anna means that what it tufidu tashbihi li mubtada'i bil khabar. It shows the way by which the mubtada is similar to the khabar. It shows us the similarity in meaning. So let's look at the example here. Like كأن الكتاب أستاذ. الكتاب أستاذ. Verily, the book is a teacher. But what Ka'anna does here, it establishes that it is only a likeness. Right? So we now say Ka'anna al-kitaba ustadun. Verily, it is as if the book is a teacher. So it shows, so here it clarifies it that we are not saying that the book is actually a teacher, but because in the real sense a book cannot be a teacher. But Ka'anna, when it enters upon this mubtada and khabar, it helps us to now see that we are only establishing a likeness between the kitab and the ustad, that the book is like a teacher, it's not actually a teacher. So that is the function of ka'anna. So we have taken three huruf now: inna, anna, and ka'anna. Inna and anna, they establish the existence of a feature for the mubtada, and ka'anna establish a likeness between the mubtada and the khabar. So we'll look at the next example. The next half. لكن تأتي للاستدراك وهو منع السامع من فهم شيء غير مقصود. So what does lakinna does? Lakinna comes as an exception, as an exception. وهو منع السامع من فهم شيء غير مقصود. And it is, and what this istidrak, what this exception means, is that we are preventing the listener from understanding what we do not intend the listener to understand. So that is what it shows, contrast. So that is what lakinna does. Basically, we can say lakinna means but. So let's take an example. Al-athathu qadimun. The furniture is old. So when we want to use lakinna, we can see an example here. Al-baytu jadidun lakin al-athatha qadimun. The house is new, lakin, but lakinna al-athatha qadimun. So but the furniture is old. So we don't want, so what happens here is that what al-baytu jadidun, we're already coming with a line of thought that this the house is what, the house is new. So but automatically when you believe that the house is new, then the listener expects that everything in the house is actually new. So but lakinna comes here as an exception, as an istidrak, to contrast for us that even though the house is actually new, al athata qadim, the furniture inside is old. So that is how lakinna works. So it basically works with the meaning of what, of but in English language. So now we go to the final two huruf. Harfan la'alla, later, later comes first. وليت تدل على تمني حصول الخبر. later تدل على تمني حصول الخبر. while what لعل تدل على رجاء وقوعه. So we are going to treat these two together because they basically have the same they have similar functions, but the functions are not exactly the same. So I'll talk about the English meaning of the function generally, and then how they differ in their usage in Arabiya. So later تدل على تمني حصول الخبر. Later means that what, later points to the hope that the khabar will actually happen. What is stated in the khabar will actually happen. While la'alla tadullu ala rajai wuku'ihi. La'alla points to the hope that something should happen. That is what, that the khabar should actually happen. So what is the difference between the function of these two things? So we go further to explain that وَتَمَنِّي يَكُونُ عَادَةً لِأَمْرٍ بَعِيدِ الْحُصُولِ. That tamanni, we use tamanni when we are talking about something that we are hoping that is the occurrence is far. So like it will be very difficult for it to happen. The likelihood that that thing will happen is low. That is what, that is at tamanni. And what do we use for tamanni? We use later. While amma raja'u fayakunu adatan fi umuri al-qaribati wuku'i. That the raja, on the other hand, it is used when we are talking about things that the occurrences are actually closer, the occurrences are more realistic, they are closer, and they are more likely to happen. So I think we get the meaning, the difference between tamanni and roja. And what is the difference? Tamanni is when we are talking about something that the occurrence is very, the likelihood of occurrence is very slim. And what do we use for tamanni? We use later. On the other hand, what do we use for la'alla? We use la'alla for roja, and that is when we expect that the likelihood of something occurring is actually very possible. So let's look at a very good example of using later. So for example, when we want to use later, let's imagine somebody says later shaytana muslimun. Later shaytana muslimun. Wow, that if only, or perhaps if only shaitan was a Muslim. If only shaitan was a Muslim. So if somebody says later, in that case we can see that it is a very accurate usage, because the occurrence of shaitan becoming Muslim is not ba'idul husul. It is very, very unlikely. The possibility is very slim, and it's not exactly realistic. On the other hand, we say in the case of Raja, that way we can use la'alla. We can say that what, when la'alla zaydan alim, la'alla zaydan alimun, if only Zayd was knowledgeable. And we can see that the possibility of la'alla, of the Raja in this case, is actually very possible for it to what, for it for it to happen. Zaid can actually become a knowledgeable person, but we know that Shaitan cannot become a Muslim. So those are the kind of examples where we use later when we see that when somebody is hoping for something that is unrealistic. So in that case, it is called a tamanni, and the right harf to use in that case is later. On the other hand, where what is being hoped for is something that is actually possible, that it can happen in this world, then we use what? We use la'alla, because la'alla points to raja, that actually hoping that something may actually happen. So those are the case those are the basic understandings of each of these inna and its sisters. And what do we say they mean? So who are the inna wa akhawatuha? Who are the inna and its sisters? We have inna, anna, ka'anna, lakinna, later, and la'alla. So inna and anna, they what their function in a sentence is to establish the function of the mubtada in the sentence. That is, we are establishing the feature of the khabar for the mubtada in inna and anna. While ka'anna, we are establishing the likeness, the similarity between the book and between the mubtada and the khabar. Lakin shows what is tidrak, it shows an exception. That is basically in English where you say but, while later and la'alla, they are used to express the hope that something should happen, and later is when the hope is unlikely, something that is not realistic, and that is called tamanni, and that is what we use later for. While roja is when what we are hoping for may actually happen in the short or distant future, then we see the likelihood of occurrence. Then in this case we can say that what that person is having roja, because the person is actually hoping something that is realistic should happen, and in that kind of case we use la'illa. So that's what we earned for today, inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in our next lesson, inshallah, we are going to go further into the functions and roles of